We are looking forward to this great second hour as we get into AI and enterprise. And so we've talked about AI in content creation, in music, in just creative overall, and audio. But now we're going to get into the enterprise aspect of it. And we have with us today Raleigh Murch with us, who is the managing director of global AI at NTT Data. Welcome to Office Hours, Raleigh.
Hello, team. Thanks so much for having me. I've seen some familiar faces here, so great to see you all.
So we are in the midst of our series on AI, and we're so happy that you're here with us to just really break down how enterprise is using it, how you are working with organizations, especially on a global scale, for them to be able to really think about how they're using it, how they get their team's privacy concerns. So before we get into all of those questions, if you can lay the groundwork for us of, how is it different for enterprise and for the average user?
Yeah, I think it's kind of more full spectrum now. You think about kind of the average user. It's more about maybe engaging with a Chat GPT or a Claude type interface, and that's often you think about it from a co-pilot perspective, just that sort of back and forth request response engagement. And when we talk about really in the enterprise, it's holistic installation. We're talking about design patterns, how it's being developed, how the infrastructure is laid out for repeatability and velocity. We're talking, it's governance, it's scale. So it's really across the spectrum in terms of, adopting it in mass, and really bringing the latest of technology into the enterprise to bring real gains.
How did you get here in this, speaking of AI, in the enterprise space? Because there are some people that it's digital transformation. So because of what's been happening over the past number of years, but AI is not new. Machine learning is not new. Computer science is not new. Tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah, it's well said, Liberty. So I think it's, my background started, almost, I'd say 10, 11 years ago. I had an opportunity with AWS where I was part of their global specialty practice for AI ML. And so basically what we would do is, travel, globally, looking at opportunities for, AI ML solutions then. And my focus really at that time was in computer vision. So this is way before generative AI was a thing. And so, it was one of those things when you're working with computer vision, nobody really cares. Nobody's paying attention. You've got data scientists that they're working on their, notebooks and doing experimentations, kind of behind the scenes, and nobody was really paying attention then. But we were driving some really interesting insights in, across manufacturing and consumer packaged goods and in healthcare. We're really making a difference. But I don't think anyone was paying attention then like they are today. And I think the reason that is, and maybe this is a whole other rabbit hole, is the ease of adoption and engagement. So when Chat GPT was released, I think it was really easy to with just a browser and some basic NLP engagement. Just being able to have a conversation with an AI, people were able to really dive into some enlightening insights. Whereas before, you kind of had to have more of a framework and tooling behind the scenes to engage. So I think that's what's really caused a renaissance of sorts.
And what are some of the biggest challenges that you find enterprises have when it comes to adopting AI, or let's go a step back of like, why is this something that they would really need to begin to consider if they're not already?
Yeah, it's the impact of AI, particularly generative AI, is real. There are a lot of folks saying, this is just a phase. There's a lot of black box magic that's happening here, and because it's black box, it'll never be fully adopted. But what we're seeing and meeting with customers globally is that there's real savings to be had with adopting the technology. And you think about real automation potential, for example. So when we think about automating existing manual processes, now we're able to put cognitive thinking in the flow to reinvent workflows like we've never before been able to do. We've been able to take documents now and for example, we've got an initiative now that I would call Leave No Pixel Behind. You think about a document in whatever structure it may be in, whether there's text or images or handwritten signatures, and running it past, myriad steps of AI to really extract the value of that document. Whereas before it was brittle processes. And so there's a lot of kind of new and emerging design patterns that you're able to take advantage of to extract real value for organizations. So I think just even at the engineering level, it's definitely worth a look. And we often find value in, meeting with customers up front and having a kind of a discovery session with them to help them understand this is what AI is about. I think about it as AI is really just a new ingredient in the existing technology recipe. So let's go back and look at, let's look at processes, let's look at how we're building products today, and let's look at what this new ingredient might mean to create net new recipes for our business.
Alex?
Thanks for joining us. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, I was working with a group that they've taken a large volume set and then they apply, AI to, generative AI to it, stability in this case. And what it does is you can ask natural language questions. It's going to give you natural language answers, only interrogating that volume, which is like 50 books. But what it does is then gives you the references of how it found those. And so it goes, this is the answer. But if you want to check my work or if you want to dig into it deeper, it starts to lay those things out for you so you can kind of keep on exploring. But that was a needle in a haystack before. Like it would have been, you had to have been a scholar to find those places that it talked about those things, let alone get an answer back that you could potentially use. The question for you is, what does an enterprise need to do to start preparing their content, preparing all the data sets that they already have to be interrogated by AI?
Yeah, it's interesting, Alex. It's oftentimes, so data is the biggest challenge for AI adoption, I would say, or one of the leading challenges in terms of, you think about data preparedness. But the interesting thing is you can actually use AI on the quest for data preparedness. I think we're learning right now, AI is really good at preparing and bringing in unstructured data and making that more structured, more accustomed to data that the enterprise has maintained. And so you don't have to wait and take on these very costly data, kind of data formatting, data preparedness initiatives. Before you get to AI, you can actually apply AI to that to format it, appropriately. Now, what's interesting, you talked about a pattern that's gotten really popular right now, Alex, which is a RAG pattern, is what they would refer to that as, is retrieval augmented generation. So through using retrieval augmented generation, you're able to use all of the goodness of a natural language model and apply it to a very specific data set. So you bring in let's imagine you bring in one of these open source models like a llama model into your organization. And what, I think these LLMs, what they're good at summarization, they're good at translation, they're good at, being able to communicate in a natural language type way, among many other kind of facets and features. And so, but it also has all of the data that it was trained on. Well, in the case that you mentioned, you really don't care about the data that it was trained on. What you want to do is apply all of that goodness, all of those features to a data set that you may be to a curated data set that your organization may be interested in. And so RAG is that facility that enables you to say, I want all the goodness from an LLM. I want to be able to do it to a finite data set that's about my company or my business. And so that's a really popular kind of a pattern.
And sometimes it's stuff that you can't have in the public as well. So if you look at an agency in the United States government or as a military solution or other things like that, you have enormous data sets that you want to interrogate. But the thing is, obviously, that's not a public thing. So all of that has to sit outside of the public cloud. So it seems like it's just a perfect place to go. And I feel like a lot of times LLMs, I think partially because they don't want to pay for it or continue to have lawsuits, aren't giving us these reference points, but it's really powerful. Like it's, because when I jump into Claude or ChatGPT, that's the beginning of my research. Like it's not like I'm not saying, oh, give me an answer and I walk away with it. I'm trying to get a sense of what the water looks like, right? And then I'm going to now I know the terms to use and I know the concepts to use to further research that on Google or whatever. And what I kind of want, and I think where Google could potentially go with this is those, and Google does this to some degree already. I'm going to give you an answer, and then I'm going to start giving you a bunch of links that you can look at. Now, it's not tying that answer back to those links, but it does feel like those two things go together really well.
Yeah. I think that's well said.
And Raleigh, if for a moment, just for the sake of our audience, and we are global and we've got people in media, production, technical side of things, can you share some use cases that you've experienced where a company might come to you and they're looking to do XYZ and that you help them through that process, just so that will just really help to lay some groundwork for our community?
Yeah, just making it real. I think one of the kind of the most popular general patterns, and I'll get specific, but when we think about one of the more general patterns is I have disparate data sets everywhere. So we're an organization. We have, to take the medical field, let's say you take the medical field, and now you're looking at, you have your electronic health record data, you have radiology data, you have data from physical therapy, you have, and all these kind of silos, data exists in various places. So imagine if you have what you could imagine as a kind of a longitudinal health record. So all of those data elements referenceable in one place. Imagine the insights you could generate and relationships you could understand. And so a lot of organizations are starting to see the power of, let's bring all of our data, structured and unstructured, and let's allow AI to connect it all for us. And now that we've got all these kind of neurons connected and we can understand the way in which relationships start to happen, we can start to ask AI for insights. To make things really interesting, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and AI can give us a lot of those insights. It's interesting to me, for example, if anyone's ever done this, is you take a data set, and you take a data set and attach it into a chat GPT interface, and there are things that to ask it. I don't know, maybe it's data about the Olympics, and you're just asking about known what's a in terms of training times and how to training times relate to your propensity to be able to perform live in a particular performance. But you could also say, give me three interesting insights that might not be evident about this data set, and it's going to start to talk about the seasonality and how seasonality impacts certain performances and all these other kind of things that you didn't know. And so a lot of businesses are trying to tap into some of the generative, BI insights that come from AI, where it's actually that trusted advisor telling you things you didn't even know you could ask, which is interesting.
Awesome. Ryan?
Yeah. Raleigh, I was just intrigued to understand whether you are more often interacting with big enterprises or with kind of small and medium businesses, and whether they're kind of both adopting and investing here, or if you're just really kind of starting off on the enterprise side.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ryan. I think one of the things that I'm surprised by, quite frankly, is that larger enterprise, like the honeymoon phase, it appears in large enterprises, is sort of over, and showing up and dancing about a chatbot or talking about prompt engineering and trying to instill the value from that play is long gone. And they are, I've found that they're pretty far down the path of kind of POCs and experimentation. And really what they're looking for at this point in time, it's like, we understand our problems, and we've done a lot of experimentation around that. Where we need help is additional velocity, cutting deeper into our backlog of ideas, or we need help with scale. So now we have some ideas, we have some traction. We need your help to scale this out even further, or maybe we need help with the governance. Goes back to something I think Alex alluded to, is that you've got to you realize too late that you need to start to understand, transparency and explainability. And when you rely on models that they don't kind of release their training weights, and they don't release the data, that's they were trained on, and they don't have really good data cards or model cards or whatever. And you've kind of built some synergy against that. And now there's true ambiguity in your solution, and it's kind of hard to get back to that. So several organizations have enough momentum down that path, and they're trying to figure out, how do we get back to good governance, because we've already built a lot of momentum in this direction. Now, speaking to kind of maybe on the other end of the spectrum, you've got large enterprise. They seem to be a little bit more mature, whereas I think a lot of the smaller companies are looking for support really on the engineering side. So they really want us to go deeper in what are the design patterns, what are ways we can really dig a little deeper to solve more of the complex problems, because we need something to distinguish ourselves in the market. Right. We're looking for market share. So we want to be true differentiators in the AI space. So what do you have in terms of advanced concepts and multi-LLM frameworks and, these sort of deeper concepts?
Do you find a pattern with what those organizations look like? Is that a revenue? Is that company size? Is it how long they've been in existence?
I think it's the maturity. It's the maturity of their AI organization prior to this kind of revolution, as it were. And if they were doing some semblance of AI prior, they tend to be a little deeper down the path in terms of, we get predictive analytics now. We just have more tools to do that. We understand that conceptually LLMs, we understand retraining models, and we kind of understand. So they tend to be a little bit further down. So now they're really looking for, it's about scale, it's about governance, it's about infrastructure.
So their leadership basically has a handle on that. It's so they're not trying to learn it and understand what's happening. This is a capacity issue.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Alexander?
Businesses always look for ways to increase efficiency and, reduce costs. And we've seen over the last decade, companies laying off support teams so they can outsource them to other countries where labor is cheaper. And of course, it strikes me that it's not a matter of if, but when AI, and I'll use AI as a general catch-all term for large language models, neural networking, and all that sort of stuff. It strikes me that it's just a matter of time where this type of technology will eventually, or could replace, a lot of human beings. And I could see a lot of people losing jobs that do technical support jobs. So I don't have the answer to this, but how do you see that? And what do we do with all these people if AI bots just start replacing every single human being that do these types of jobs?
We hear about that quite a bit, and I'll tell you, sometimes we get in scenarios where we have to, it's a call center scenario where we do seat sharing, and we're trying to understand the business, and we're trying to understand the nature with which they're taking calls and how they're reacting, so that we can think about how AI may create opportunities. And you feel that sort of friction as you're sharing that seat with the person that's taking calls and trying to understand and tell us about how their business works. And you definitely feel they feel like there's this kind of black box that's going to come in and replace that. So I'll tell you, Alex, we definitely feel the reality of how they're thinking. My opinion on this, I think it's just going to change. It's going to change how we interact with the technology. So folks should think about, how does it change how I interact with my day-to-day job? And a lot of what's happening, you think about the executive order that was just passed last October. Biden passed the safe, reliable and ethical executive order. And there were a couple of components in that talked about, the need to upskill and train these folks and get them on board with AI. So it's not about, I don't think, about just necessarily replacing that replacing that role. It's just going to enhance how they work with the technology, much like, Excel didn't put accountants out of business, right? It just changed how accountants are working. So I think we have to consider how we all change how we interact with technology. I mean, everybody on this call, we used to, interact with, when we needed to find something online, we would interact with Google and we would kind of put a search in, and you had to get it right to get the answers back. And then all of a sudden it started auto-completing, hey, would auto-completing similar searches, and you could kind of even misspell it a little bit. And now we're no longer, asking Google anymore, but rather, pulling up a ChatGPT interface or asking something, an agent on our phone, and it may be giving us information that we didn't know that we needed. And so it's really advancing how we are all interacting with information. And I think it's important to ensure that, the training and education at every level needs to occur so that it doesn't directly impact jobs, but rather upskills the velocity and capabilities.
Ryan?
When it comes to the actual technology platforms that folks might make investments in the short term, Raleigh, is there a specific company you're seeing folks kind of procure licensing from, like a Snowflake or the like?
Yeah. I've gotten that question a few times, and I always, my opinion is invest in the infrastructure, right? I think that at the tools and technology layer, there's a tool du jour for AI. And so if you're thinking about making, whether it's an investment decision or if you're thinking about procuring tools for your business, I would really start at the infrastructure. So, but really to answer NVIDIA is a great bet. And I'll tell you the dark horse, I think, and maybe it's not a secret anymore, but UiPath, right? Like UiPath is everywhere from they're the robotic process automation company. And I think they were at $12 or something last I checked. But within the enterprise, there's a lot of requests for UiPath services and technology, and they've gotten a bit of an uplift in this generative AI era. They've been around for a bit, and RPA has been around for a bit, but now we can add cognitive flow and do advanced decision making within RPA. So I really think UiPath is definitely one to watch when you think about tools and licenses. And it's no secret, Anthropic is we're waiting for that go public announcement because they're I don't know, with an $18 billion valuation or something at this point.
So Raleigh, there's the idea of investing to kind of share in their upside, but what about when it comes to just procurement? If you're at a C level inside of an organization and just want to make an investment in tooling that you can actually leverage, right, to try to actually advance kind of like Gen AI inside your own organization, is there something that you'd recommend people start looking at trying to buy and procure themselves?
Yeah, I think the easy answer there is probably 365. Microsoft 365 is a great one. We've been part of several initiatives to try and extract ROI out of that, and it's still early days. It's still tough to put your finger on the pulse exactly what the savings is. But with a robust training and you're able to kind of release that into an organization in a way that's effective, and you split the organization into cohorts and address different personas at different times to ensure that they're really getting how to use the tooling instead of just buying everybody a license and hoping everybody watches the video or whatever, but really go hands-on with how you're thinking about the cross sections of the organization. I think there's immediate upside to be had just in terms of productivity when you think about licensing a software that's going to really make a difference.
And Alex.
I think one of the things that we hear a lot about, of course, is the increased efficiency and letting people go. But there's also this incredible opportunity to train people, customized training at a level that has never been possible before. As people being able, I find that just for me, learning is never been the same. Because I'm constantly asking questions and constantly doing stuff in a way that it would take me a long time to search for that information. even if I go search for it after that, it's in a context of what I just read. Do you see companies spending a lot of energy as they think about this on training models to just make the employees that they have, be able to come up to speed much faster?
I think that's one of the largest upcoming trends for generative AI is the contextual learning. That's where there's really value to be had, and it's almost almost the Montessori style of learning where you're meeting people where they're at and growing them individually instead of standard schooling where it's one voice and you hope it resonates with people at their various levels. Technically, it's interesting that you can actually keep track of everyone's growth along a learning journey. So if we all had aspirations to obtain some certification in an organization, we're all going to get there at different paces. And you can start to track your journey and store that journey in context. And that journey is fed into the model with each interaction. So the model is actually adjusting and speaking to you as you're climbing the hill at your level.
Well, and it's a customized solution based on generalized information. So for instance, I do this all the time now with apps that have enough stuff on the web and enough whatever. I'm developing a workflow and I say, how do I do this? Like I'm not looking for the manual. I'm not searching the manual. How do I do this? And I get this list of how to do it. And then I just follow that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, admittedly. But about 80% of the time, I get an answer to the question that fast. There is no video to show what it just told me how to do because I asked it something very specific. I'm looking for this or how do I do this? And it gives me that in the context of that app. And then I'm able to move. And it just, to me, I mean, the amount of time savings is just intense, but it seems like, to your point, that's something that is, if it isn't here now, it's coming very quickly.
Very quickly. And, from an enterprise perspective, you imagine there's an objective within enterprise to up-level employees to some knowledge achievement. They need to achieve some there's some objective depending on where they're trying to go. If it's a manufacturing process and there's work instructions and you've got people that are coming in with their various backgrounds and you're trying to accomplish some manufacturing standard before you start to put folks on the line. So now it doesn't have to be the mandatory 10-hour training that it might otherwise be, and I'm just sort of making that up. Maybe someone comes in with a lot of experience and you can just tell at the way they're interacting, you can get them through those 10 hours quicker because of the way that they're responding, the nature that they're interacting with the model, so that it's meeting you where you're at and getting you where you need to go along a very,
I was talking to a teacher. I mean, just of how they're looking at using it in the classroom, which really I think relates to enterprise to some degree. And they're like, well, we can do things like instead of teaching kids how to read by having them read books they're not interested in, we can just say have them ask AI about things that they love, and we can set the Lexile score, so that of what the reading, how complex the sentences are and everything else. And then afterwards, so we can say, like, tell me about horses, or tell me about Appaloosas, or tell me about these things that the child is interested in. They get it. And what it does, though, is it's handing it to them at a certain level of complexity that they have proven that they can know. And then at the end of it, it can build a test that is based on what it just told them. Here's the test. Like, did you comprehend what I just told you? And if it does, you're going to go, the next time you ask that question, I'm going to go from 300 to 350, and I'm going to make it a little bit harder. And they think that, like, we think of Lexile scores now at like 1400 as a senior in high school or whatever. With this model, they're talking about getting there by the time you're 10. You're just accelerating that because it's a customized, lifting that, increasing that weight to what you're actually interested in, which is going to make you far more likely to engage.
Yes. And what's interesting, there are design patterns now where they're starting to store that as context. So you imagine a database that just stored that learning journey, that progress that you made in that iteration, and then feeding that back into the model so that it understands where you're at, where you need to go, and it just you can do that over larger steps, which is really, really interesting. So I think that'll be a big play in education and just learning overall.
And before we get into our questions, I've got one more here just around, it's going to be the more human side. A big part of your job is making sure that while companies or enterprise organizations are coming to you for strategy, for implementation, but there's still the element of having different stakeholders that have to come to the table to agree on certain things. How have you seen or any strategies around building trust behind the solution? Because while this is still AI related, but this is just an overall business strategy that can really help our audience.
I think cross-functional teams are key. Across the organization, you start thinking about the key components of the organization, and now they're starting to. There's a new role that I've been hearing a lot about lately is AI ethicists that they're starting to put on within organizations, and so between finance and engineering and ethics and creating that center of excellence to really demystify the black box of AI in the organization. And I think that starts to build trust. And then I think permeating into the software development lifecycle as you're building products, understanding, the key components, like where's the data coming from? What's our intent with this? How are we thinking about training this? So as you think about AI governance, that's really going to build, that's really the key to building trust in an organization. And you have to get everybody involved. This is not just an engineering, effort anymore. It shouldn't have been anyway, but this is really a good force and function to get everybody involved.
All right, Alexander, let's get into these questions.
All right. The first one is from Ronny Hofsøy in Tromsø, Norway. Is there a good app for iOS to convert a PDF report to speech? And that also sounds incredible, preferably like a podcast, or do I need to do that conversion on my computer instead?
That's an interesting one. Yeah. A lot of from a tooling perspective, I end up using a lot of ChatGPT as a workbench. So I think the best $20, this is my shameless plug, the best $20 since we all had those AOL CDs in our mailbox to get internet is, personally, I've opted into the ChatGPT Premium, and that enables me a bit of a workbench to start to attach documents and master the prompt instructions to get outputs in very interesting ways. And so if I were looking at something like how do you take a PDF and create a podcast style, it's really easy to go in and take the PDF of interest, go in and attach that, and just through various prompt engineering, through custom GPTs, to be able to kind of experiment rapidly to get the output that you're looking for. That's my take anyway.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. It's really fascinating to me. And by the way, thank you, Raleigh, for being here. It's really fascinating to listen to you. One of the things, when I saw this question and it said PDF reports, it reminded me of all the time, since I do some announcing, that somebody gave me something written for the eye and was asking me to translate it into something written for the ear so that it sounds natural and sounds conversational. And there's a good little bit of effort. And I just wanted to get your take on where we are in that kind of translation internally, in terms of taking something structured for one purpose, turning it into something that is more humanized, if that's even a term. Where do you think we are now, and where do you think we're going to get to?
Multimodal is starting to win the day at this point, and you start to think about these models and being able to flex from one output to another, and it's becoming interesting. How we can sort of experiment in that facet. I've been having a lot of success. I know there's probably some audio files here. You think about like Udio. If anybody's had experience with Udio, I'm having a lot of fun, generating music from just prompting. And so I go in and I'll actually write lyrics and describe the style of the music in text that I would love to have happen, and then go through rapid iterations of musical output. And it's just, it's absolutely fascinating. So, I think now we're learning to go, it used to just be request response, text in, text out. Now we're really starting to think about, multimodal interfaces. My wife, in fact, does a lot with Midjourney, where she's in fact equaled her, equaled her income on her professional job just through the creation of leveraging, doing travel posters with Midjourney and doing a lot of post processing. So she's having a fair bit of success, just playing around with the multimodalities that are available to us now. I don't know if that quite gets at the answer, Bill, but
you're getting closer. I'm hoping that there's a way that we can take some of that formal stuff. I mean, his question scared me as a former announcer. A PDF, you want me to read a PDF? I know what that's going to sound like, and it's not written to sound human. It's written to sound in the style of all the education we've had in terms of proper sentences, few contractions, all the rest of those things. And I'm hoping that eventually, as this becomes more humanized, there are ways to get that result out, something that sounds more natural and less stilted because of the old training that we had.
I think it's, share a personal story here. I did I'm always playing with AI in various ways. And I did any presentations that I do, I'll write the script and then just have professional narration narrate the script over top of the video. So anytime I'm asked to do a video, I don't narrate it. It's just kind of tacky, and I love my cadence. And so I've played with a lot of the kind of the third party tools that give that professional, that almost Bill-like sounding cadence to, as they talk. And I've been quite impressed. Now, my wife is a fan of a lot of the murder mystery type stuff. And so I actually did a Keith Morrison take where I trained, took a YouTube video where he had a 30-second clip and trained it trained it with his voice and then replayed the narration to have that Keith Morrison 8-line kind of effect for something I did internally, which was a nice touch. So I think we're really rich on how we start to imitate the cadences and vocal intonations that happen.
Next question.
Ryan Rademan from Chicago, Illinois, here on the panel. Do you have a read on where Amazon's tooling is at by comparison with Microsoft?
Given prior experience with Amazon, I'm definitely sharp on Amazon's tool set. And so I can give you that take and then just a perspective, because we're primarily a Microsoft shop at NTT Data. So I think about AWS as really providing the sound infrastructure. You bring a privatized VPC, you bring an open source model, you bring, you want data that's safe and encrypted while it's, at rest and while it's in transit, and you kind of have this safe zone of where you want to start to build out your solution. I think AWS is well suited for that environment. There are a lot of folks that I think when we started this journey that were scared about using black box APIs and making calls out to APIs. What about my data? What's it doing with my data? And I think AWS really got an early focus on, hey, bring it all here. Bring your model here. Bring your data here. It's all private. It's all in our VPC. It's all, you have full control of the data that goes in, of the data that goes out. And so when they created Amazon Bedrock, of course is a famous kind of famous solution with a rich kind of UI, enables guardrails and fine tuning and all those sorts of things. Amazon Q, I think, is another one that they have, that they realize it's not going to be long before folks just want to chat with their data in a very safe and secure way. Right? People started standing up chat bots, and then they started thinking about, how do I chat with my data? I think Amazon really quickly noticed that and stood up, kind of productized that offering. So for the maybe security conscious, where you're bringing all your stuff into some privatized walls, I think they think about their managed services in a way that facilitates that persona. Microsoft, who is a leader, and I'm probably not super qualified to speak on this, but I think they're more it's sort of more API driven. We're going to provide rich APIs for you to interface with, and we're going to make sure we have sound contractual agreements so that you feel comfortable leveraging our APIs. More of that model. So it's my 2 cents, I guess.
Alex?
not exactly enterprise, but what is your take on Apple's kind of, we talk a lot about their kind of 3-tier on-device, private cloud, and then just open to all the different services right now, ChatGPT. What is your take on that model? What do you think about it?
Yeah, just in terms of how they're thinking about monetizing it, or what?
Well, or just the how they're using it. So they're basically doing as much of the operation as they can on the device, and then they have a private cloud that they're building out of their own that they can go out to if the device can't answer the question. And if neither of those can answer the question, they give you the option to use currently ChatGPT, but they've already talked about using Gemini and other ones to make those available to you. And that there's kind of this 3-tiered, and a lot of us are really intrigued by it. It's different than everybody else's approach to it. I'm just curious if you have any opinion about that approach.
Yeah, I haven't worked in a lot of manufacturing prior. I think the edge model is the edge model is here to stay. AI at the edge. There's still a lot of trepidation in manufacturing and in healthcare to move beyond the edge. So I think the edge play is a sound play. Managing your own compute, you're managing your own data. I think enterprises want that as a solid option. And sort of kind of the next step beyond that, I'm a big fan of bringing the model, bringing the data, and being able to see and feel and touch every element of the architecture in a way that you can control it. Being able to instrument the puts and takes and all that. I think when we start to move beyond that, I think adoption and engagement really, really drops off. I'm not seeing a lot of openness to continue to do external API calls because you just don't know what the fine print. You just don't understand, and just frankly, we're not seeing a lot of patterns that implement that framework. So I think the edge model is sound. I think the within the confines of an internal infrastructure with a managed cloud provider, I think that's okay. But when we start to just think about API endpoints and sending out data to API endpoints, I think that's where it really drops off.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, do you think we'll see growth in self-hostable large language models for enterprise use cases where data sovereignty and security issues are important?
100%. Yeah, that's we're seeing a lot of smaller, more manageable models that are coming out now, and I think that's for that purpose. And I think there's a lot of federated training initiatives that are happening now, where a lot of people in industry are pooling anonymized data and building a model that they can leverage for their industry. So I think we're going to move away from, API hosted large models that require just massive compute and start to get to more, what's the minimally viable functionality that we need? And then let's just add and supplement that with our own data. So in context learning with our data and start to be a little more kind of privatized instead of having, just a couple of big players hosting it for everybody.
Next question.
Lawrence Donald in Silver Springs, Maryland asks, what industries are you seeing a great deal of business growth using AI tools?
I think the two, and I think might have mentioned them earlier. I think healthcare, there's a lot of momentum in healthcare and certainly in manufacturing. I think it's AI, in my experience, is no secret to the manufacturing of industry. I did a lot of AI work in the manufacturing space with AWS. So a lot of computer vision, a lot of defect detection, a lot of process vision initiatives that they've been looking for cost savings for some time. And so now we're doing. You think about a lot of LLM hosting at the edge and creating cognitive flow inside of workflows. I think that's. I think manufacturing. I think, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, is really first. From a sort of a vertical perspective. And I think healthcare is coming around, but really more on the back office side. There's still a little quite sheepish on putting stuff in front of, patient facing initiatives. But we're seeing they're realizing documents and data is in disarray in healthcare, and AI is a big step in solving that problem from an automation perspective. So I think a lot of traction is happening there as well.
Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies asks, living in the Caribbean, we see our governments still use lots of paper info and a lot of human interactions, keeping government employees happily employed. How do you see enterprise AI disrupting and making changes at this level?
Yeah, I think it's important to from a cultural perspective to honor those exchanges. So you think about it from a discovery perspective when you're looking at architecting the workflow. When you look at thinking about the governance, how are you automating the right sequence points in between that workflow? So AI is a tool. It's something that we definitely want to make sure that we're leveraging responsibly. But we don't, when we think about the automation workflow, we don't have to we want to leave the human in the loop, so to speak. So,
Next question.
And this was a follow-up from Rian Smith from Trinidad West Indies. Having a tech background, how would you suggest I get myself ready to inspire the change to these Caribbean organizations, both private and public?
Yeah, it's almost a full-time job, I'll tell you, just to keep your eyes on the rules and regulations that are happening out there. There's lots of ISO standards that are coming out regularly, and it's important to stay plugged into a lot of the emerging changes in the kind of in the governance landscape, and so it's quite frankly, if I reveal my own sort of sausage making, as it were, you could actually set up a generative AI agent to actually go out and read and summarize the standards of the day, as it were. And that there are actually even a couple of services that will do some of those summaries for you. But just getting to the point, you can actually set up a bot that will go out and give you kind of a weekly summary of what's happening in industry, according to the filters or attributes that you're interested in. So you might consider that as a way to stay ahead. And just as a general design pattern overall, if you're trying to stay in tune with what's happening in the industry over a particular domain, consider setting up a bot as a bit of an agent that you can rely on day over day.
Next question.
Lawrence Donald in Silver Springs, Maryland. Where do you see human avatars maturing in the market? What are one or two use cases using the human avatar?
Human avatars are definitely getting an uplift with generative AI for sure. The medical industry is definitely one where, healthcare industry is definitely where we're seeing lots of use. You think about, we've got overworked, nurses, especially after kind of the COVID era, and believe it or not, the humanization from an AI perspective is getting pretty good. And I've even had a hand in designing some of the avatars for healthcare that enable you to chat with like your EHR record. So specifically, imagine a scenario where you've just had surgery. You're probably sort of woozy from the event. You get wheeled out. You probably have someone that's there to pick you up, and then you kind of come to the next day. You might have questions about your post-operative instructions. So imagine an avatar that's available that you can privately engage with, that you can communicate with about your post-operative procedures. What was the medication I was supposed to take, and at what interval, and what was I in terms of rest and ice, and what were the instructions? So that gives you that engagement method, that private engagement facility that you can engage with. So I think we're really starting to see an uplift in AI avatars, certainly in healthcare.
Alex?
Do you see that kind of evolving from the push the button when you want to talk to the nurse, where you could sit there and talk to, you're in a hospital bed, and you say, this is the problem I'm having, and I'd like to do something about it. And it being able to just deliver that to the nurse as a text, like this is what they need, or decide that that's really important and do something about it quickly. Or is that too much liability, I guess, of it doing that translation?
I'll tell you, it's happening today, Alex. It's just in terms of things that we're seeing. And through the use of tools. So, we're used to just request response engaging with Chat GPT. And so now through the use of tools, we can actually call APIs and create more complex systems through the use of this technology. And so we're actually looking at and building avatars that can trigger an event, that can trigger an escalation, that can trigger a scheduling event. So as you start to take advantage of a lot of the tooling in a generative AI solution, now you're having a conversation with an avatar that's going beyond just, hey, tell me more about what you know, to let's engage in some third-party activity that will create some response. So I think that's, definitely with the use of tooling, I think we're getting, we're there for sure.
Next question.
Russell K. in Brooklyn, Maine asks, how can companies balance the potential productivity gains of AI with the need to reskill their workforce and address job displacement concerns?
Yeah, I think AI is your partner. If it's going to be an ingredient in the recipe, it needs to be an ingredient holistically. And I do think AI can be your partner in the upskilling activity as well. So as you're bringing in AI to maybe, cannibalize a portion of the work and activity that's being performed, I think so too can you also create initiatives to help upskill, to make sure that the workforce is keeping up. As we talked about, with Alex, I think it's a really powerful learning platform to engage. And so those are definitely things to think about in tandem, so that you're bringing the workforce along with the change.
Next question.
Next question is from Chris Widener in Indianapolis, Indiana. With several cases on the legal aspects of large language model data going through the courts, do you see any hesitation on adoption of tools that may have to be retooled post-court decisions?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, let me think about that one. Yeah, I think it would be, when I think about it, it goes back kind of to the AWS pattern. If you think about using large language models that are open models that you're able to kind of train internally, and you train it with the data that you bring, you have full control of the model, you have full control of the data that's there. You're staying within the bounds of legality, versus sending something out where you may not know enough about the model, you may not know enough about the ethics stance and kind of where that's at. So that's why I would be more hesitant to use something external where you're not really clear about the model framework and sort of the ethics of that intended model. I don't think that really gets it, but that's a
next question.
One perspective.
Ryan Radham in Chicago, Illinois is asking, if you were a CIO, would you be rushing to implement something like Databricks or Snowflake as a consolidated data warehouse?
Yes, I would. Versus a bespoke solution, I would tend to leverage. I would bet our roadmap aligned to some of the larger players in the industry. And no doubt they're waking up every day thinking about, the latest innovations and how they're, kind of pulling everything together from a generative AI strategy perspective. And anytime there's a tool or technique that's out there, they're likely leveraging some form of that. And so I would have more of a tendency to bet on one of the big boys versus, trying to roll my own, as it were. So for sure.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood, California is asking, won't working only with a company's internal developed data for the AI result in siloing and prohibit thinking outside the box, causing stagnation of creativity?
I think it depends on the use case, and it's important when you're adopting an AI solution that you're bringing in dynamic content, right? So you have the model, and the model's trained on whatever it's trained in, but through the architecture of how you build the solution, you should be bringing in context data that's dynamic. So I think it's rare that you should establish a generative AI solution where you're just addressing the model for what it is. But so too should you also be bringing additional data from the outside to make sure that it's making decisions on net new data. It's kind of speaks to that retrieval augmented generation pattern that I talked about earlier in the show.
Well, Raleigh, thank you so much for just spending the last hour with us. We've gone from jobs to infrastructure to digital transformation. And we'll always like to use this time to just give you the last word of any tips or advice that you want to share with our community.
I just want to, thank you guys for having me on. I've definitely followed the show, so it's nice to see all the faces looking back at me. So I appreciate the opportunity. You guys have laid out some great content, and happy that you were able to have me on and contribute. Hopefully, I was able to make a difference out there and uplift some folks. So thank you all.
Again, that is Raleigh Murch, from Managing Director at Global AI at NTT Data. And you can watch the rest of the upcoming shows for the week at officehours.global. Producers, we want to thank you so much for your questions, your engagement in the community, and of course, our panelists for being with us and responding to the questions and sharing your valuable insights. And of course, to our back-end team, for without which this would not be possible, 7 days a week. And let's see how far we've traveled. We have traveled 62,000 miles, 100,000 kilometers. That's 492 million bananas for scale on the Taluk Traversal. Thank you so much. Again, you can head over to officehours.global or ask officehours.global to submit your question for an upcoming show. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Raleigh. That was awesome.
That was great.
Yeah,
Thank you. Well done.
Appreciate that.
Folks want to know
Great
where
show.
they can follow you. I saw you on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else that just to learn more and engage with you?
I think probably LinkedIn tends to be the tip of the spear from a
Awesome.
professional perspective. Yeah. Thanks.
For all of us. Yeah, I was like, I actually have more followers on LinkedIn than I do on Facebook. Like I was thinking like Facebook's kind of general, but over, you do it for 20 years, it builds up.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Raleigh.
folks.
It's great.
Appreciate it. Bye.
I see you. Thanks.